Have you ever had martinis at lunch, by the way?
No, I have not. I'm trying to think, yeah, what is the strongest drink I've had at lunch? Probably a beer. So I don't know if I've ever had like a
Ah,
mixed drink at lunch.
yeah. Well, martinis are pretty strong anyway.
Yeah.
Having two will rock your world, man. But I can imagine. I'm gonna make you a star, Peaches. It's gonna.
Hey everyone, it's Elliot.
And Todd, welcome to Two Designers Walk Into a Bar, an ongoing conversation about pop culture and iconic design.
Today we're going all Hollywood.
Yeah, we're gonna be all up in the business.
We're discussing the treatments of two iconic studio logos for 20th Century Fox and Warner Brothers.
So have your people call our people.
Because we're having a 3 martini lunch and making some amazing deals here in the bar. You know what? I think if we mandated a 3 martini lunch before our listeners engaged with each of our episodes, man, they would love everything that we do.
I know. Each episode would be 3 hours and 70 minutes or something.
3 hours and 70 minutes?
Well, yeah, because, we're on martinis. So.
Oh, yeah, like the Reverend Horton Heat. It's martini time.
Okay. All right. Hey,
Yeah.
this is a pretty cool topic. You want to tell our listeners what we're going to talk about today?
Yeah, so this is something I think that we are all familiar with. If you're fans of movies, basically
If
for
you've
the
ever
last
seen a movie.
if you've ever seen a movie in the last 100 years,
or a TV show.
yeah. You've probably seen, or cartoon for that matter, right?
Yeah,
In the
yeah.
case of certainly of the studio logo that you're going to be discussing.
Or, streaming services too.
Yeah, everything. So if you're a fan of entertainment, you're probably going to be familiar. It's one of these things. This artwork is so ubiquitous, I think, that
Yeah.
I've really never stopped to think, I wonder what the history of this stuff is.
Yeah, same. Yeah.
So, movie studio logos is what we're going to be talking about today. So, Todd, do you want me to go first? Do you want to go first? How do you want to do this?
Go for it. Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so the logo that I brought with me to the bar today, and these logos, or at least the one that I'm going to be talking about, it exists in print form as well. As I was doing a little bit of research on this, there's a one-color print version that has to go on letterhead or something like that. But what I want to talk about is really, probably now that I think about it, probably one of the first instances of liquid branding, right? Because these logos, or at least my logo, it was always in motion. So I want to talk about the logo for 20th Century Fox.
Yes.
Because this is one I've always wondered about, to be honest with you, even as a little kid. So this has been in front of, how many movies? I don't even know. Countless movies.
Oh, yeah.
So just by way of example, the one that pops into my head is, Star Wars, like the first Star Wars, for example. You'll see it there. So let's talk a little bit about this logo, because the reason I chose it is it's typographic, but it's also sort of architectural. It's concrete and abstract at the same time. Like it's kind of, it's the name of something, but it also is kind of representing something. So I'm sure everyone is, at least in some way, shape, or form, familiar with this logo, but naturally we'll have it on our episode page. We'll have multiple iterations of it on our episode page. So let's talk about the company, and then we can get into the logo. So 20th Century Fox, the studio originated from the merger of 20th Century Pictures and Fox Film Corporation in 1935. So as we're sitting here talking today, 90 years ago. And so that created one of the most iconic studios in Hollywood, as we've talked about. Thousands and thousands of movies have come from this studio. So the logo that we're talking about, it's nicknamed the Monument. So I never knew that, but it makes total sense.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And it was originally designed by a guy named Emil Kosa Jr., Kosa is his name. And it's this monolithic Art Deco-inspired structure, like this stone, this sort of sandstone colored structure, and it's illuminated by these searchlights.
Yeah.
And it's accompanied by this music that's called fanfare. So it's this powerful fanfare composed by, wait for it, Todd, wait for it.
Okay.
You think it's recognizable now?
Yeah.
Wait till I tell you the name of the composer, because I did a double take when I read this.
Okay.
Just given the history of our podcast. Are you ready?
The composer of the fanfare.
Yes, the composer of the music for this logo.
Okay. All right.
Alfred Newman.
Wait, what? No. The Alfred Newman?
Not Alfred E. Newman. I don't think his middle name was Enigma when I looked it up. but I was like, how? Seriously, I read this name and I sort of sat there for a minute just staring at it. And then I was thinking, did Mad Magazine boost this name from the composer of the 20th Century Fox music? Like, what are the odds of that? Now, I don't know if they did or if they didn't, but I couldn't find anything to say that they did.
That's so perfect.
But I think, again, it's poetic in these strands that just seem to somehow continue to weave through everything that we do, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So it turns out Alfred Newman, without the E, he was also very noteworthy. So he was this pioneering Hollywood composer, music director. And get this guy scored over 200 films.
Whoa.
He won 9 Academy Awards. He was at 20th Century Fox for 20 years. Wow. He actually revolutionized film music by developing what's called the Newman system. So he's the first one. It dawned on him, hey, you know what? The action that's actually happening on the screen, we can actually synchronize that with the music beds that are playing in film.
Okay.
So think about how music influences storytelling in cinema. You can thank him for that. He's the one who figured that out. Obviously, he did a good job. He got 9 Academy Awards.
Yeah, and yet we never knew his name
right
until now.
You and I didn't. My guess is people who aren't
people
film
in Hollywood. Yeah.
So for all you insiders listening, we apologize to you. They're banging their heads on their steering wheels or Bluetooth speakers or one another or whatever it is they happen to be there.
Yeah, I'm sure they're lining up at the Hollywood Starbucks to listen to us.
They're probably at the Big Boy. They're probably writing their next screenplay over at the Big Boy.
That's right.
Okay. So over the decades, the logo evolved to fit new formats, which, again, totally makes sense, right? You think about, Todd, as long as you and I have been graphic designers, think about all the different screen sizes, all the different paper sizes, all these different formats, right?
Yeah.
So, of course, film went through the same thing. CinemaScope, right? That was a different screen proportion, so you have to revise the artwork for that. CGI animation, got to hop on the CGI train, redo the logo. And then ultimately in 2020, after Disney acquired 20th Century Fox, the name changed slightly to 20th Century Studios. So they had to update the artwork for that. So anywho's, let's talk about the screen. So let's talk about the color logos. So I'm going to go through some of these different phases really quickly.
Okay.
And there's kind of a theme for each of these. So from 1933 to 53, the first 20 years, let's refer to this theme as light beams galore. I don't know if it was, you think about a Hollywood premiere, obviously, and you have spotlights.
Didn't you use that as a dancer name in college?
High school.
Okay.
It was, that was more of my early work. We're talking about early work right now, Todd.
All right. Please continue with your story.
That was when I was aspiring. Dancer.
You were hungry. You needed the money.
Yeah, I did. So light beams galore. Yeah, that would be a good chat name. So this is from the early 30s, early mid 30s, early mid 50s. So as I mentioned, the first iteration of the monument was painted by Emil Kosa Jr. In 1933. And who was this dude? He was actually a very skilled matte artist and watercolor painter. So he was already in the scene, right?
Yeah.
So you had all these searchlights. This thing, again, it's sort of this architectural building type thing, kind of mimicking, if you think about what movie studio buildings look like on a lot, right? For a, you have all these different individual studio buildings. The logo kind of looks like that. It also kind of looks like a big Art Deco movie theater.
Yeah.
So if there's going to be a movie premiere, listeners probably think about, for example, like Mann's Chinese Theater in Hollywood and how there's always spotlights out front for a movie premiere. So that whole idea, right? So this was really the dawn of that era. So it only made sense that you would have that in a logo for a movie studio because they were doing big stuff, man.
Yeah.
They were rolling out big stuff.
This was the heyday, man.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, dramatic searchlights. Also, if you think about it, and I sort of didn't wrap my head around this till just now. This is between the wars.
Yeah.
So this was really when searchlights had come into their own and people sort of knew what they were. So this was like a peacetime use for this thing that originally was used during wartime because it was, they were looking for airplanes. So early airplanes.
Yeah, it was Depression era too. So I imagine just that massiveness, those giant columns and searchlights, it gave people a little bit of a respite when they went to the movie theaters. Like, holy cow, this thing is a monument.
Yeah, it's opulent. It's over the top on purpose. You're right. It's a form of grandiosity, a form of escape. And as we mentioned, our friend Alfred Newman, not Alfred E. Newman, he had the iconic music. Again, as a first go, it was pretty great, right? But it obviously had some clutter because it had all kinds of lights overlapping one another, all these beams. So it's kind of a little busy for a logo. So the next era we enter into, let's refer to it as on a tilt.
Okay.
So from 1953 to 1981, the logo was adjusted again. And the reason was because of that CinemaScope format, which was a widescreen format. So it had to fit the screen when people were going to the theater to watch the movies. So again, you gotta love these names. So we have our guy Alfred, we have our guy Emil, and then we have another illustrator who comes along in 1953, and this guy who reworked the logo, his name was Rocky Longo.
You're making this up.
No, this is a real dude, real guy.
These
Rocky
were not
Longo.
Adult films they were making,
no,
right?
No, but not to the best of my knowledge. So what did Rocky do? How did he improve the logo? So the 20th, if everyone remembers, it's not the word spelled out. It's the number with a TH after it. So it's huge, and it sits at the top of this logo. So he decided to rock the 0 in 20th and sort of tilt it to really take up more space because, again, he had to widen the logo, again, to fill the screen. So he's, quote-unquote, improving the proportions for this aspect ratio. He also reworked the searchlights, so they got repositioned to better fit these new dimensions. So they were pushed more off to the side. So some of that overlapping I mentioned, that starts to, now that he has more real estate to work with, that starts to be diminished somewhat.
Okay.
The animation itself ran longer because now it had this CinemaScope branding, so they had to talk about that. So it's the duration is longer. So our friend Alfred had to stretch the music out a little bit. So imagine a producer just at a frame with his hand saying, "Can stretch it out longer."
Yeah, keep stretching it.
But this is Rocky did a good job. They got their money's worth out of this because it was used for almost 30 years. It was used for 28 years till the early 80s. So that's pretty incredible that a logo from the early 50s to the early 80s went untouched, especially in Hollywood.
And particularly, with the media company. And with the changing technology. Yeah, that is.
And the output, right? I mean, how often was this logo getting looked at as each new movie was cranked out? So this was, the Star Wars era.
Oh, yeah.
So, you think about like a sci-fi epic, and it was using the same logo that had been designed over 20 years previously, and cars still had tail fins and stuff, or probably really even before cars had tail fins. Sorry for all you car aficionados. I don't remember when tail fins officially became a thing. Okay, so let's jump forward to 81.
Okay.
This let's call this era, Todd, the tilt is gone.
Ah,
But you know
sad
who isn't
trombone
gone?
music.
You know who isn't
Who
gone?
is?
Our friend
Who?
Rocky. Rocky's still
Okay,
there.
good.
So Rocky got the gig again. So he repainted the logo in the early 80s. This time he got religion or better typographic skills, and he decided to straighten the zero out.
Okay.
He brought symmetry back. Symmetry's coming back, Todd. That's what the 80s were all about.
All right. Yep. I could see that.
And then he also refined the searchlights because, again, you're getting better technology. So he refined the searchlights. Now they're looking, I think, a little bit sharper, a little bit crisper. But again, you're getting better quality. So stands to reason. But this version was still hand painted in the early 80s.
Okay.
Computers hadn't entered the scene yet. So this was really it. And so this still lasted 13 years. This lasted until 1994. And then this was really when this is the 80s. So when you think summer blockbuster, this is when the logo really comes into its own. So you've got widescreen at this point. You've got the CinemaScope piece. You've got a crisper, more updated logo. And then you have amazing popcorn films of the 80s. I mean, what a recipe for success, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. 1994 comes along. Todd, computers, entering the scene just like with everything else. So Fox decides that they have to go CGI. So this is where we're going to go with an era that's called the sky's the limit. How about that?
All right.
Okay.
All right. I like it.
Yeah. So for the next 15 years, from 94 to 2009, there was a more expansive sky in the logo. So think about it being more grand, like more vast, more wide.
Yeah. Okay.
Then the structures at the base of the logo. So again, this little sort of like architectural bric-a-brac. I don't know exactly what you call it. One thing I always liked about this logo.
Name.
What's that? Yeah, bric-a-brac. I don't want to,
I think that's architectural bric-a-brac.
Yeah, I studied architectural history, so that's coming back. Bric-a-brac.
Right.
I'm sure, again, all the architects are like rolling their eyes.
They're like, ah.
But what I loved about this logo, and still love about this logo, is the fact that you could very easily have made it centered, like, the perspective, but it's oblique, right? It's coming from one side. I always think about like Ben-Hur, and I think about these epic movie posters where the movie title is carved out of stone. I mean, this logo even predates that. So naturally, if you're doing something like that, you have to have this architecture at the base of it to kind of ground it and show the scale. It's like they could have put a banana in it for scale, but instead they put in smaller buildings and spotlights. Yeah. So anyway, they repositioned these structures, and then they also added some typography. That was part of the reason. So they added the phrase "a news corporation company" byline beneath the monolith. You probably remember that. You've probably seen that. Yeah. Then they also revisited the fanfare music. So again, I think our friend Alfred probably by this time had exited this mortal coil. I think he was no longer with us. So they got a couple different guys, a guy named Bruce Broughton and another guy named David Newman. And over the years, during the 90s, they re-recorded the fanfare music, I think to just tweak it and perfect
the same score, though, right?
Yeah. The score has not changed. It's not like maybe there was like a house music dub remix version, but I'm unaware of that.
There had to be.
Yeah. But because it was CGI, they just naturally had more control, so the animation became smoother. And there was also this dramatic camera sweep, right? This was really the first time where you could, sort of have a different camera angle, if you will, right? You had a vantage point, and you're modeling this thing. So you could really have the viewer be wherever they needed to be.
Right.
But again, I think because you still had this architectural oblique angle, as I mentioned, you're not going to like do something like it's a crazy drone flying over this thing or through it or anything like that. It's just very sort of subtle movement. Again, sort of a nod to the grandiosity of it all.
Yeah.
Okay, so then let's go up to 2020 when Disney acquired it. So 2009 to 2020, it was redesigned yet again, and they hired the studio Blue Sky, and this was the animation studio that had created the movie Ice Age, if you remember that.
Okay.
So they decided to warm up the color choices. So there were, was like a richer gold. The look overall was more polished, and the entire logo itself was subtly tilted to the left. And I think this was to correct visually, even though it was probably, it was like the Leaning Tower of Pisa or something. It wasn't like visual. Like technically it wasn't accurate, but visually it was accurate. Although the Leaning Tower of Pisa is inaccurate, so I'm not exactly sure why I brought that up. Well, it's accurate. I guess there's probably one way you can look at the Leaning Tower.
Okay. We're not talking about the Leaning Tower piece.
I don't know. Part of me now wants to like put that in the background. Like, I wonder if like in the next one they was like, hey, what is that in the background? What's that white building? That's kind of anyway. But I digress. The searchlights. These folks apparently love tweaking these searchlights because it seems like every single time this logo's revisited, they're like getting rid of searchlights, moving searchlights, adding more realistic searchlights. So that's what they did yet again. And, how they cross over and where they cross over creates this slight visual tension in this version of the artwork. And the front light, though, competed with the main text for attention, right? So they did this thing that they had more control over than ever, but it still kind of created a distraction. And I remember this version when they redid it, because I definitely remember that beam of light sweeping across the front and thinking, boy, I guess they want you to read this quick. Or maybe their thinking is like, well, this has been around at this point for 60, 70 years. Like, you know what it is by now, right?
Yeah.
So, Todd, everyone's favorite movie, both due to the knock you in the head with a brick symbolism, as well as for the use of papyrus. The debut of this logo was before Avatar.
Oh, okay. I never saw that movie, but I don't need to now. You've just
that's it. It's plot spoiler. They use papyrus.
Oh, there you go.
Anyway, then the byline, the News Corporation byline I mentioned earlier, that was removed in 2013 when Fox started like busting apart its conglomerate into these different business lines. So it's funny, it got rid of some of the complexity, but then it kind of inadvertently added some complexity. But again, this is all tweaky sort of inside baseball stuff, right? Because I would say the average person's like, yeah, 20th Century Fox, like whatever.
Right.
Okay, but Disney snaps these guys up, Rupert Murdoch sells it, and then the Fox name was removed. So now it's 20th Century Studios as of 2020. So I don't know if that's a riff on
recent
220s. I don't know. Anyway, this updated logo appeared before Call of the Wild. So I never saw that movie, but
I think it's heavy symbolism, and they probably use typeface as bad as papyrus.
Really? Wow. Okay.
Neither of us have seen it, so let's just go with that.
I thought it was the one where Leonardo DiCaprio was in the bear skin. Isn't that movie?
That was wasn't that Bear of Wall Street?
Yeah.
Was that what that one was?
Yeah,
okay.
I think that's what. Let's write that down. We'll have to
Let's
research
put attack in that and get back to it.
Attack, taxidermy tack. But the overall design remained nearly identical to the the prior version. Fox was replaced with Studios because he got that line in there. Like, you can't just yank a word out, because the monument, Todd, the monument would fall over.
Yeah, you can't. Do
hello.
That.
And then because they had a bigger name, they adjusted the size of Century as well, so you'd have that visual balance. And this time it wasn't our friends from Ice Age, it wasn't Blue Sky, it was another shop called Picture Mill. And so they darkened it a bit and added a little bit more realistic lighting, and they actually this time dropped a larger and more detailed LA skyline in the background. So no Leaning Tower of Pisa. They probably, if I had to guess, did not include the Hollywood sign, because that would start to compete with their other sign. Although, you know what they should do, now that I think about it?
What's that?
They should buy the mountain, or the hill next to the Hollywood sign, and they should Mount Rushmore style carve this logo out of it.
Hey, that's not a bad idea.
I mean, if they did that, people would forget all about that. And I know you love the Hollywood sign.
I do love the Hollywood sign.
But, that would be pretty amazing.
That would be. And then that could be their 2027 version that they come out with. Real film.
Except, see, they're going from painting to CGI to, totally real life. That would be incredible. Hold on, do you know 20th Century Studios general email address? Because I'm going to fire something off.
Hello at 20th Century Studios.
Okay, I'm typing this
at gmail.com.
Oh. Boy, that's a long. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But they still use searchlights and stuff like that, right? for
Yeah,
this
yeah,
one?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Todd. The searchlights are
I know.
You're
I
never
know.
going to get rid of
They had to
searchlights.
refine those, of course, to go with the.
Yeah, I mean, you're
LA
not going
sign.
to.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, look, if you're given this assignment, you can't leave the searchlights untouched. I think if
I could
there's
see you going
any
in and pitching
through
that.
line from all these different versions of this logo, it's come for the monument, stay for the searchlights. I think is really. I don't even know, man. But
all right.
so yeah,
Woo.
so a lot drinking from a fire hose, but 20th
Yeah,
Century
that's
Fox.
lots of drama, man.
Yeah, speaking of drinking from a fire hose, I'm a little parched.
Oh, I get it. You could use a drink.
You think the bartender can make something using an icy? Maybe they could add a little rum.
My guess is that by the time we're done, it'll have been cheaper for us to have gone to the movies multiple times.
So no drink.
No, I'm sorry.
We'll be right back.
Hi. We want to take a moment to mention that if you're enjoying this episode, we have an archive of topics ranging from the Olympics to movie posters,
Think Ghostbusters.
iconic images,
Think Bigfoot.
punk music,
The Ramones.
Saturday morning cartoons,
The Pink Panther.
and failed products like OK Soda. Visit our website at twodesignerswalkintoabar.com for full episode notes and visuals, the latest blog content, and to sign up for our newsletter.
Follow us on social media. We can be found on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Find the links on our website or search using the phrase "Two Designers Walk Into a Bar."
Most importantly, leave a review on Apple Podcasts. It helps more people like you find podcasts like this.
And tell a friend about us. Send them a link to our podcast from your listening platform of choice.
And if you're inclined, buy our merchandise. Stickers, coasters, magnets, t-shirts. We're designers. We make good stuff, and it helps support the show.
Get in touch. Use the contact form on our website or send an email to hello@twodesignerswalkintoabar.com.
We read every message we get. Honest.
And we're available for speaking gigs. Email us to learn more.
Okay, now, back to the bar. All right, we're back. Elliot was just telling us about the 20th Century Fox / Studios identity, the evolution of searchlights and monuments, and
That's right. In that order.
and the many different eras. And one thing strikes me, Elliot, between the two iconic studios that we're bringing to the bar today, is they both kind of stick with what was working and try to modify it for a new age. So I'm talking about Warner Brothers, and everybody knows Warner Brothers, right?
Okay. I will say I have some gripes about the Warner Brothers logo. So I want you to get into this because...
All right, and then you stop me when you're ready to gripe, okay?
Okay, we might
I'll
never get through
going
this.
then, right? All right, so when you think of Warner Brothers, you think of the Shield. It's one of the most iconic symbols in entertainment. But they started very modestly in silent films, actually 10 years before 20th Century. They started in 1923, and, they were brought together by four brothers, oddly enough: Harry, Albert, Sam, and Jack Warner. And, they kind of kept at it and have updated and modernized as they've been going along. And you got to remember, too, since it was 1923, not a lot of movie studios around then. So there was not a roadmap, and moviegoing was still kind of a novelty. So
Sure, yeah.
They had a lot of field to plow, I guess. But let's skip ahead a few years. They released The Jazz Singer in 1927, and that's famous because it's the first feature film with synchronized sound, and that's the first time The Shield premiered. with the Warner Brothers name.
Okay.
It wasn't like the Shield that we know of today. It was kind of busy. You used the term like design clutter.
Mm-hmm.
It had a shield. It had some imagery in it at the bottom. It had this embellished looking WB monogram. And it was kind of more oval shaped shield. It was very Art Deco looking. You know, I mean, it was elegant for the time, actually more than what they had because they just had a word mark. But most importantly, it started to give their products this mark of authenticity in what was then a really rapid growing industry.
Okay.
So I love that you talked about the eras of 20th Century Fox because that's how I observed the Warner Brothers identity. And the first part I was just talking about, sort of the introduction of the Shield. So we're going to fast forward to the 1930s and the 40s, and Warner Brothers became known for their gritty crime dramas and lavish musicals and even the groundbreaking animation.
Yep.
Movies that you might be familiar with at that time: Casablanca, The Maltese Falcon, Yankee Doodle Dandy, and certainly some of our favorite intellectual fare, Looney Tunes and Merry Melodies. They were both taking off at that time.
Is a cartoon the first place you saw the Warner Brothers Shield that you can remember?
Yes, the first place I can remember. Probably wasn't, because I went to movies, of course, but for me, the Looney Tunes intro, it was part of the show.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it was the first time I recognized that there was a thing before the cartoon. And the music, speaking of iconic music, everyone knows that Looney Tunes melody as well.
Yep.
When you heard that, I mean, it was like Call of the Siren. It was like, go.
Kids were galloping in from all corners.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It was the theme to fun. Like, it was going to be
that's
fun.
Good way to say it. But because their properties were spanning there were such a diverse topics, the logo had to be more flexible. So it was simplified, and it became sort of an icon in its own way. And I will say, this was at the time when the kind of wonky and WB started making an appearance, which is always, I mean, those are just two letters probably that don't fit in a shield. They probably have done them as good as they can. And I'm not critiquing by any stretch because they're, far more popular than I am. But they've always felt a little wonky to me. But anyway, that was the simplification time. Have we touched on the part that you're getting cranky about yet?
Yes.
Okay.
So that was my complaint, is I always felt like the W, the left hand, I think it was two things. I think it was the W always felt sort of wedged into the shield shape on the left hand side. And as a result of it being wedged in there, it felt very, very dense compared to the B, which is just not as wide a letter as a W. And then when you add in the two counterforms in that, so it has these two giant holes in the middle of it, the visual weight, even though the shield was symmetrical, I always felt the logo itself was very asymmetrical.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like a simple problem to fit two letters in a shield shape, but you're right. Those letters don't lend themselves to the kind of majesticness and solidness that a shield is. But, they certainly have kept working at it. So, again, we're going to skip ahead a little bit to the 50s and the 60s. And this, as you said, was the widescreen era.
Yeah.
So the shield had to become a little sleeker. They actually started doing it in color, and they chose gold also. And it was set against this sort of deep blue sky background. So, gold and blue.
Yeah.
Those colors popped really good. It looked rich, right?
Yeah, it was. And if I remember correctly, I mean, I am not looking at this logo. It's simply in my head now that it was sort of like sky blue, Carolina blue background. And then the shield background color was like a deeper, like royal blue, right? And then the letters were knocked out of it. So it kind of had this interplay between these two shades of blue.
Yeah. But it looked rich, right?
Yeah, very much so.
So in November of 1966, Jack Warner sold control of Warner Brothers to Seven Arts, Inc., and the studio was renamed Warner Brothers Seven Arts. And you can see that logo in films such as 1968's Bullet. This was the monkey wrench, the spanner in the mix, because up until then, their logos have had this shield look with a W and a B. This one was more modern. It was a giant W, and off the arm of the right part of the W, it went way up, curved, or actually right angled to the left and made a 7.
Yes, I remember this.
You remember it? Yeah,
yes.
You remember it. I mean, it was out of left field. I mean, given that the name was, Warner Brothers Seven Arts.
I never thought about the 7 in it.
I didn't either. I thought it was just a
like
fun
a decorative
flourish
or something.
Yeah. I mean, because I never knew Seven Arts existed.
Yeah,
so.
and then wasn't that logo, correct me if I'm wrong, again, I'm not looking at it, we're just talking about it. Didn't that logo also exist inside a shape that was sort of proportioned like a TV screen?
Well, you're thinking about another one.
Okay.
That came a little bit later.
Okay.
That one, the W7, they did put a shield-like shape around it sometimes. But what you're thinking about, then came the 70s, my friend. And you know the trouble that decade caused.
Yeah, but that's the 70s and 80s are my wheelhouse.
Speaking of wheels, this one went off the rails. So Warner Brothers introduced what they called the Big W logo, or sometimes known as the Worm, which it was in 1972, designed by Saul Bass.
Our friend, the man with the golden arm, among many, many other logos.
Yeah,
okay.
and
right.
NASA too, right?
No.
Who did NASA?
Blackburn, the same dude who did the
okay.
bicentennial logo.
Oh, yeah. All right. Well, we'll cut this part out. Anyway, the Worm, as they called it.
It's more than just a dance move, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah. So it was bold and it was modern, and it was, a little bit experimental looking. It was basically 2 diagonal lines that were rounded, sort of like 2 full capsules, and then a little half capsule.
Oh, yes.
On the right-hand side.
Yes, I remember that too. Mm-hmm.
So it was very unique. What you mentioned before, it did come in a little sort of modified screen shape.
Yeah.
And despite it being really unique, it received a lot of negative feedback. But, it had remained in use for 2 decades. And little interesting tidbit, even some newer movies like Argo and Magic Mike throw back to that logo because I think it was of the time.
You know what's funny, though, now that you say that? Going back to what we were talking about with Looney Tunes and Merry Melodies.
Yeah.
If I saw that newer logo when I was a little kid, I was like, wah, wah. Like, it just said it was, this is something for adults, or this is something newer, or it was going to be something boring. Like, it just didn't have that magic that the Shield had.
Yeah. It didn't fit that classic era of the cartoons. And I mean, we were kids. I had no idea that those things were made, 40 years, 30 years earlier.
Right.
But I think the more modern logo would have been like, this isn't the same thing. This isn't my cartoons.
Right.
So eventually, nostalgia won out, and by 1990, Warner Brothers brought back the classic Shield. And as you mentioned with 20th Century, they revitalized it with computer animation, more gold hues, some sparkles and some gleams and some shininess. And you can see that in such films like Batman Forever and Space Jam.
It's kind of funny thinking about those 2 movies specifically you cited, because, again, those were both intellectual property and also certainly geared toward kids, right? Geared toward the people who would totally remember the Shield before the Looney Tunes cartoons.
Yes. So it was like a cleaned up Shield, but definitely, the Shield was back. And this was, like I said, it was the 1990s. And this was at a time, too, when Warner Brothers was encouraging the filmmakers to tailor the logo to suit the individual tone of their films more. So, first of all, quick rewind, the first stylized Warner Brothers logo appears in the movie The Adventures of Robin Hood in 1938, and it was rendered as like a royal crest. So I've always loved that, when the studio logo took the tone of the movie or became, part of the movie. And in the 2000s and beyond, obviously with all the tools that people have to make movies, it's just evolved even more and more. You think about films like the Dark Knight trilogy, it was brooding and almost monochromatic.
Mm-hmm.
And you think about the Harry Potter series, it was weathered, kind of ancient looking, and they all sort of aligned with the tone of the movie. And I looked it up, and just in the past 15 years alone, there have been 200 variants of the Warner Brothers logo. Like, not changing the shape or anything, but giving it a treatment, giving it an action, making it a character in the film, which just shows us, great design is timeless, and it can also be adaptable.
Yeah, I mean, they're taking advantage of a screen and what can be done on screen, the kinetic nature of that, and so it becomes liquid branding.
Yeah, exactly.
And just for the record, 20th Century Fox has done that as well. Like, I think
they have.
Tim Burton's done that with I think he's done things with 20th Century Fox as well.
Yeah,
and I think he's done, I think it was maybe like Nightmare Before Christmas or a similar sort of movie. 20th Century Fox's logo was shades of blue, and it was frosted, and it was snowing. And
I just love that stuff. Because what it does is it pulls you into the movie a few seconds faster.
It sets the tone right off the bat.
Right. It takes the movie out of being a product and makes it part of the story. But
absolutely.
Anyway, I could talk about that for probably a lot longer. But
Elliot checks his watch.
I know, he's like, whoo. All right. Now, this brings us up to modern times. 2019, enter Pentagram.
Heard of them?
Yeah, I think they'll do a thing or two. Emily Oberman's team, they redesigned the whole brand system of Warner Brothers, focusing on the iconic shield as the centerpiece. Now, I'm going to read you some of what they did, okay? So these aren't my words. What they did is they elongated the shield to fit the golden ratio, making it more approachable and progressive aesthetic.
Okay.
So anyway, they redefined it. They actually redrew the W and the B, and they created a whole new alphabet. They created a whole new font, I should say, to fit that. So, no more did the W and the B sort of feel a little bit wonky in the context of all the other Warner Brothers materials. They have their own font now. And I will say, good on them for doing that. That's amazing. I couldn't do that. But the font, and we'll post this and listeners can decide on their own. To me, the font looks a little bit more comical than serious. I think it would play better. But anyway.
It's an entertainment company, and so I guess the typography is entertaining. Like, is that, you think, maybe the logic?
Yeah. I mean, I don't see, I wouldn't see it for Batman.
Okay.
I could see it for a comedy. But anyway, they may, not that they would do the Batman logo out of that by any stretch, but probably their business cards that will match a little bit better. The key thing is they really they updated and they streamlined all of those key elements. And this was done in time. As I said, they started in 2019, and this was done for the 100th anniversary, which was a couple years ago, 2023. Okay. And for uses of small sizes and big sizes and digital screens and giant high-resolution movie screens and seeing it on your phone, it had to carry a lot of history with it, but translate. And I think they did a pretty good job. There are versions where it's really just flat 2D, and then there's a version that has a little bit of an implied edge around the shield. And, the thing, and I stole, by the way, when I said earlier that good design was timeless and infinitely adaptable, I stole that from Fast Company because they did a piece on the rebranding of Warner Brothers, and that's what they said. And I think that's right because, like searchlights in a monument, they own them. Like, there's no way Warner Brothers would ever do a monument and searchlights now, and there's no way
Right.
like 20th Century would do a shield. It's just not right.
Right.
So, yeah, just remember next time you're at the movies, there's a lot of great innovation in history behind that little shield that you're
Well,
seeing.
in the full circle nature of how we do things, Todd, when I was doing my research on 20th Century Fox, now 20th Century Studios, the print logo, so the static logo for their business papers and what have you, it's a circle and it has an icon of two crossing spotlight beams in it. And then the studio name is out to the side in a sans serif font. But it was also designed by Pentagram. So how about that?
How about that? Well, I'm just going to have to say, and with that, let's call this a wrap.
Ooh, yes. A wrap sounds delicious. I'll take a beef fajita, burrito, maybe a quesadilla. And since you're heading to the bar and to the food truck, you could also buy us another round while you're at it.
Okay, yeah, because wraps make you thirsty.
Yeah, maybe, Todd. But, just like the food truck, another drink when you pay is also just around the corner.
Oh, man. I should have seen that one coming around the corner. All right. We'll see you next time.
Run over by the food truck and then run over by the bar tab.
All right. Bye.